They say no good deed goes unpunished. But for Clara Mitchell, a simple act of kindness didn't just bring punishment, it brought a war. Imagine finding a shivering, terrified child in a dark alley at 3:00 a.m. You'd help him right. You wouldn't think about the consequences. You wouldn't look at his expensive tuxedo and wonder who he belonged to. Clara didn't. She just wanted to keep him warm. She had no idea that by the time the sun came up, her life would belong to Dominic Valenti, the most ruthless crime lord in the city. And she certainly didn't know that saving his son was the most dangerous thing she could have ever done. The rain in Chicago doesn't wash the city clean. It just makes the grime slicker. It was 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. The neon sign of Miller's 24-hour diner flickered with an irritating buzz, casting a sickly pink glow onto the wet pavement of West 5th Avenue. Inside, Clara Mitchell wiped down the counter for the 100th time. The smell of stale coffee and grease had seeped into her pores years ago, a permanent perfume of poverty she couldn't scrub off. "Yo, Clara, lock up the back, will ya?" "I'm cutting out early," shouted Rick, the night manager. He was already halfway out the door, his keys jangling. "Don't let the rats in." "Sure, Rick," Clara sighed, tossing the rag into a bucket of grey water. She was 26, with a degree in literature that was currently serving as a coaster for her mounting debt. She grabbed a trash bag, hauled it over her shoulder, and pushed open the heavy steel door to the back alley. The storm was violent. Rain lashed against the brick walls, turning the alley into a river of refuse. Clara shivered her thin uniform, offering zero protection against the biting wind. She swung the bag into the dumpster, the heavy metal lid clanging shut like a gunshot in the night. That's when she heard it. It wasn't a rat. It wasn't the wind. It was a whimper. A soft, terrified sound coming from behind a stack of rotting wooden pallets near the grease trap. Clara froze. The alleyways of Chicago were not places you investigated strange noises. You kept your head down, you walked fast, and you prayed nobody noticed you. But the sound came again, a jagged intake of breath like someone trying not to cry. She pulled her phone from her apron, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the rain. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice trembling. "I have pepper spray." She didn't. She had a bottle of Windex. The pallets shifted. A small hand, pale and shaking, reached out. Clara stepped closer, the rain soaking her hair instantly. She peered over the wood. There, huddled in a ball on top of a discarded cardboard box, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 6 years old. But it wasn't just a lost kid. It was what he was wearing. Even in the mud and rain, Clara could tell the fabric was expensive. He was wearing a miniature, tailored black tuxedo. His bow tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck, and on his cuffs, diamonds glinted in the flashlight beam. He looked like a groom who had been shrunk in the wash. "Hey!" Clara softened her voice, crouching down, disregarding the puddle soaking her knees. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The boy looked up. His eyes were wide, dark, and filled with a terror so absolute it broke Clara's heart instantly. He was shivering so violently his teeth chattered. There was a smear of blood on his forehead, a shallow cut, but it was bleeding freely. "Where are your parents, sweetie?" Clara asked, inching her hand forward. The boy flinched, scrambling backward until his back hit the brick wall. He didn't speak. He just shook his head frantically, pointing toward the main street. "Is someone chasing you?" He nodded. Tears mixed with the rain on his face. Clara's instincts screamed at her to go back inside, lock the door, and call 911. But if someone was chasing him, someone who let a 6-year-old run into a storm in a tuxedo, the police might not get here fast enough. Or worse, the police might be the ones he was running from. This was Chicago, after all. "Okay," Clara said firmly. She took off her denim jacket, her favorite jacket, and wrapped it around the boy's soaking shoulders. "We're going inside. It's warm and I have pie. Do you like cherry pie?" The mention of food seemed to break his trance. He hesitated, then allowed Clara to scoop him up. He was shockingly light like a bird. She bolted back into the diner, slamming the steel door, and throwing the deadbolt, the chain, and the floor latch. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She brought him to the staff break room, a tiny closet with a heater. She sat him on a crate and grabbed a first aid kit and a clean towel. "I'm Clara," she said gently, dabbing the blood from his forehead. "What's your name?" The boy stayed silent for a long time, staring at the steam rising from the mug of hot cocoa she'd pressed into his hands. Finally, he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Constance." "Nice to meet you, Constance. We need to call your mum or dad." At the word dad, Constance dropped the mug. It shattered on the floor, hot chocolate splashing everywhere. He grabbed Clara's arm, his grip surprisingly strong, his nails digging into her skin. "No," he screamed, his eyes wild. "No call." "Bad men. The bad men are with the phones." Okay, Constance, calm down." Clara hushed him, hugging him as he sobbed. "No phones. Just us. You're safe here." She held him until his sobbing turned into exhausted, ragged breathing. He fell asleep right there in her arms, smelling of rain and expensive cologne. Clara looked at the shattered mug and the sleeping boy. She noticed something she had missed in the alley. Embroidered on the inside lining of his tuxedo jacket, visible now that it had slipped off his shoulder, was a crest. A silver hawk holding a rose. Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wet clothes. She recognized that crest. She'd seen it on the news, usually accompanied by headlines about RICO cases racketeering and bodies found in the Chicago River. It was the Valenti crest. She hadn't just saved a lost kid. She had possession of the heir to the Valenti crime family. And the door to the diner rattled. The rattling wasn't polite. It was the sound of someone testing the structural integrity of the steel. Clara killed the lights in the break room. "Constance," she whispered, shaking the boy gently. "Constance, wake up. We need to hide." The boy woke up instantly, his eyes snapping open with a soldier's alertness that no child should possess. "Is it them?" he whispered. "I don't know." Clara shoved him into the bottom of the supply closet behind stacks of flour sacks. "Stay there. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear. Promise me." He nodded, curling into a ball. Clara stepped out into the main dining area. The diner was dark, save for the streetlights outside. Through the front glass windows, she saw them. 3 black Cadillac Escalades were idling at the curb, blocking the entire street. They didn't have plates. The rain slicked off their black paint like oil. Men were getting out, not police officers, not customers. These men moved with military precision, wearing dark raincoats. They carried things that looked very much like submachine guns tucked under their coats. The front door chimed. They hadn't broken the lock. They had picked it. In 3 seconds. Clara stood behind the counter, her hand gripping the handle of a bread knife she had hidden under a menu. It felt pathetic. A bread knife against an army. The door swung open. The wind howled in, followed by 4 men. They fanned out instantly, checking the booths, checking the corners. Then a fifth man entered. The air in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than the diner building itself. He wore a long black trench coat unbuttoned. His hair was dark, slicked back from a face that was devastatingly handsome, but ruined by the sheer violence in his eyes. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a king who had just arrived to burn down a village. This was Dominic Valenti, the capo dei capi, the man the FBI had been trying to pin down for a decade. He walked straight to the counter. He didn't look around. He knew exactly who was in charge. He stopped 3 feet from Clara. His eyes were the color of cold steel. "Where is he?" His voice was low, a baritone rumble that vibrated in Clara's chest. Clara swallowed hard, her throat dry. "We're closed. You can't be in here." Dominic didn't blink. He placed a hand on the counter. On his pinky finger, a silver ring flashed the same hawk crest. "I am not going to ask you twice," Dominic said. "My son. The tracker in his watch died 20 feet from this building. If you have touched a hair on his head, I will dismantle you piece by piece." One of the men behind him stepped forward, racking the slide of a pistol. "Boss, let me handle her." Dominic held up a hand. "Wait." He leaned in closer to Clara. "You're trembling, miss." He glanced at her name tag. "Clara, are you trembling because you're guilty or because you're smart?" I found him in the alley," Clara stammered, deciding that lying to this man was a suicide mission. "He was cold. I brought him inside." "Is he alive?" The crack in Dominic's voice was microscopic, but it was there, a flicker of humanity in the monster. "Yes, he's safe. He's hiding. Bring him to me." "He's terrified," Clara snapped, finding a sudden surge of courage. "He thinks bad men are chasing him. If you go back there with guns, you're going to traumatize him even more." The room went silent. The henchman looked at Clara as if she had just grown a second head. Nobody spoke to Dominic Valenti like that. Dominic stared at her. For a second, Clara thought he was going to reach across the counter and snap her neck. Instead, his eyes narrowed, calculating. "Everyone out," Dominic ordered, not breaking eye contact with Clara. "But boss," the henchman started. "Out!" Dominic roared. The sound was terrifying. The men scrambled out the door into the rain. Dominic turned back to Clara, his chest heaving slightly. He took a deep breath, smoothing his tie. He placed his gun on the counter, sliding it away from him. "No guns," he said, his voice controlled again. "Take me to my son." Clara hesitated, then nodded. She led him to the back, past the grill to the supply closet. She opened the door. "Constance," she whispered. "It's okay." Constance peeked out from behind the flower. When he saw Dominic, he didn't run. He didn't scream. "Papa!" Dominic Valenti. The butcher of Chicago dropped to his knees in the dirty break room floor. He didn't care about his Italian suit. He opened his arms. "Constance! Dio mio, Constance!" The boy launched himself into his father's arms. Dominic buried his face in the boy's neck, holding him so tight, Clara thought he might crush him. She saw Dominic's shoulders shaking. The most feared man in the city was crying. Clara looked away, feeling like an intruder on a private moment. She started to back out of the room. "Wait!" Dominic's voice stopped her. He stood up, lifting Constance effortlessly in one arm. He wiped his face with a handkerchief, the mask of the cold mob boss, sliding back into place instantly. But his eyes were different when he looked at her now. They weren't cold anymore. They were intense. Burning. "You saved him," Dominic said. It wasn't a question. "I just gave him hot chocolate," Clara mumbled. "You took him off the street. You hid him. And you stood up to me." Dominic stepped closer, towering over her. The smell of rain, expensive leather, and gunpowder filled her senses. "Do you know who I am, Clara? I watch the news. You're Valenti. Then you know I owe debts, and I pay them. You don't owe me anything. Just take him and go. Please." Dominic studied her face, his gaze lingering on her tired eyes, her messy hair the fraying collar of her uniform. "The Moretti family took him," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "They snatched him from his school. He escaped from their trunk. They are hunting him right now. If they had found him in that alley before you did—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Well, they didn't," Clara said. "No, they didn't." Dominic reached into his jacket pocket. Clara flinched, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a thick stack of cash. It must have been $10,000. He tossed it onto the crate. "Thank you, Mr. Valenti, but I can't take that." Dominic paused. "Nobody refuses my money." "I do. I helped a kid. I didn't do it for a payday." Dominic smirked. It was a dark, dangerous smile that made Clara's stomach do a flip. "Proud. I like that. But you have a problem, Clara." "What problem?" "The Morettis know he escaped in this sector. They will come looking. They will question everyone on this block, and when they find out a pretty waitress was working the night shift—" He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "You are a loose end now, and the Morettis cut loose ends." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you can't stay here. You're coming with us." "Excuse me. I have a shift tomorrow. I have a cat. I have a life." "You had a life," Dominic corrected. He reached out and gently touched a strand of hair falling over her face. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "Now you have a target on your back. Grab your coat, Clara. You're under my protection now." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Dominic sighed, looking at Constance. "Constance, tell the nice lady to get her coat." Constance, resting his head on his father's shoulder, looked at Clara with big, sleepy eyes. "Please, Clara. My house has a big gate. The bad men can't get in." Clara looked at the money on the crate, then at the gun on the counter, and finally at the man who was offering her safety in the form of a kidnapping. "I'm going to regret this," she whispered. "Probably," Dominic replied, guiding her toward the back door with a hand on the small of her back. "But at least you'll be alive to regret it." As they stepped out into the rain, the wall of black SUVs waited. Dominic opened the door for her. Clara Mitchell got into the car, and just like that, the waitress from Fifth Avenue ceased to exist. She was now the property of the Valenti syndicate. The drive took 40 minutes. They left the city limits, the streetlights fading into the darkness of the heavy forest preserves north of Chicago. The rain hadn't stopped. It drummed a relentless rhythm on the roof of the armored SUV. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Constance had fallen back asleep, his head resting heavily on Clara's lap. Dominic sat across from her, scrolling through a tablet, his face illuminated by the blue light. He was making calls, speaking in rapid-fire Italian that sounded more like growling than a language. Clara stared out the window, watching the trees blur by. She felt a phantom vibration in her pocket and reached for her phone only to remember Dominic's head of security, a man named Silas, who looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast, had confiscated it the moment she got in the car. "We are approaching the gate," the driver announced. The vehicle slowed. Clara saw massive iron gates rising out of the mist, flanked by stone walls that looked high enough to keep out a medieval army. Cameras with red, blinking eyes swiveled to track them. The gates groaned open, and the convoy swept up a winding driveway lined with ancient oaks. The Valenti estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. It was a sprawling Gothic revival structure made of grey stone with gargoyles perched on the eaves, staring down judgingly as the cars pulled up to the main entrance. "Leave the boy," Dominic said, pocketing his tablet as the car stopped. "Silas will carry him up." "He's gripping my shirt," Clara whispered. Constance's fist was indeed bunched tightly in the fabric of her uniform. Dominic leaned forward. The space between them vanished. He reached out his hand, brushing Clara's thigh, as he gently pried his son's fingers loose. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her that she absolutely did not want to feel. He was a criminal, a murderer, and he smelled like sandalwood and danger. "Come," Dominic ordered. The moment Clara stepped out of the car, the reality of her situation hit her. Dozens of men were patrolling the grounds. Dogs, massive Rottweilers, were straining against leashes near the perimeter. They entered the foyer. It was breathtakingly cold. Black marble floors, crystal chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls and art that belonged in a museum. But there were no family photos, no warmth. "Silas, take Constance to his room. Put a guard on the door. No one enters but me," Dominic commanded. Silas, a giant of a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow, nodded and carried the sleeping boy up the grand staircase. "And now for you?" Dominic turned to Clara. Before he could continue, a door to the right slammed open. A man stormed out. He was younger than Dominic, perhaps in his late 20s, with slicked-back blonde hair and a suit that was too loud, too flashy. He had a glass of scotch in one hand and a cigarette in the other. This was Marco Dominic's younger brother and underboss. "Dom, where the hell have you been?" Marco shouted his words, slurring slightly. "The Morettis hit the shipping yards. We lost 3 containers. And who is this?" He gestured to Clara with his cigarette ash. "The nanny. She's a guest," Dominic said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, icy tone. "She saved Constance." Marco scoffed, walking a circle around Clara, looking her up and down with open disdain. "She looks like she scrubbed a toilet 10 minutes ago. You brought a civilian here to the safe house. Are you insane? She's probably wired." "She is not wired, Marco. She is under my protection. She's a liability." Marco threw his hands up, sloshing scotch onto the marble. "The Morettis are out for blood." "Dominic, they broke the truce, and you're playing house with a stray cat you found in the rain." Dominic moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. 1 second he was standing still. The next he had Marco pinned against the wall, his forearm pressing against his brother's throat. The Scotch glass shattered on the floor. "Constance is alive because of her," Dominic snarled, his face inches from Marco's. "If I hear you speak one more word of disrespect, I will cut out your tongue. Do you understand?" Marco choked his face, turning red. He tapped Dominic's arm in surrender. Dominic released him, stepping back and straightening his cuffs. Marco gasped for air, rubbing his throat. He shot a look of pure, unadulterated hatred at Clara. "Welcome to the family, sweetheart," he rasped, then turned and stormed off. Clara stood frozen. She realized then that the danger wasn't just outside the walls. It was inside, too. "Ignore him," Dominic said, as if he hadn't just choked his brother. "He drinks too much, Mr. Valenti," Clara said, her voice shaking. "I can't stay here. That man hates me. You have people with guns everywhere. I'm just a waitress. I have rent to pay. I have a cat named Muffin who needs to be fed." Dominic looked at her. For the first time, he looked exhausted. The adrenaline of the rescue was fading, revealing a man carrying the weight of an empire. "Your rent is paid," he said simply. "Your landlord has been contacted, told you had a family emergency. As for the cat," he signaled to a guard by the door. "Send a team to her apartment. Retrieve the animal. Bring it here." You're sending a tactical team to get Muffin." "I solve problems, Clara. You are worried about the cat. I get the cat. Now you are worried about your safety. You are safe here. No one gets to you without going through me." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "But you must understand," he continued, his voice low. "You cannot leave. The Morettis have your face. They have your name. If you walk out that gate, you will be dead within the hour. You are in the cage now, Clara. It is a gilded cage, yes. But you are mine until this war is over." Clara felt the trap snap shut. "And how long will that be?" Dominic looked at the shattered glass on the floor. "Until every last Moretti is in the ground." He turned to a severe-looking woman in a black maid's uniform who had appeared silently at the top of the stairs. "Mrs. Higgins, show Miss Mitchell to the blue room. Get her something to wear that isn't that." He gestured vaguely at her diner uniform. "Yes, sir," Mrs. Higgins droned. Clara watched Dominic walk away toward his study. He didn't look back. The blue room was bigger than Clara's entire apartment. It had a 4-poster bed, a fireplace, and a balcony overlooking the stormy grounds. The attached bathroom was filled with soaps that smelled like lavender and money. After a hot shower that washed away the grime of the alley, Clara put on the silk pajamas Mrs. Higgins had left. She felt ridiculous, like an imposter. She couldn't sleep. The silence of the house was heavy. Around 4:00 a.m. she heard a sound, a soft crying. She opened her door. The hallway was dark, lit only by the occasional lightning flash. The sound was coming from the room across the hall, Constance's room. The guard Silas had posted was gone, likely on a bathroom break or a patrol shift change. Clara hesitated, then pushed the door open. Constance was thrashing in his bed, tangled in the sheets. "No, no," he whimpered. Clara rushed to the bedside. Constance, wake up. It's just a dream." The boy gasped, waking up with a start. When he saw Clara, he launched himself at her, burying his face in her chest. They were coming back, the men with the masks. "Shh." Clara rocked him, stroking his hair. "Nobody is coming. Your dad has big dogs outside, remember? And big gates. Papa is always working." Constance sniffled. "He's never here. He's keeping you safe." "Can you stay?" Constance asked, looking up with big, watery eyes. "Until I fall asleep." Clara's heart melted. "Move over, Scooter." She climbed onto the massive bed, sitting against the headboard, while Constance curled up against her side. She began to hum a lullaby her mother used to sing. Slowly, Constance's breathing evened out. She didn't hear the door creak open. Dominic stood in the doorway. He had taken off his jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing a tattoo of a cross on his chest. He held a glass of whiskey. He stopped dead when he saw them. The waitress looking like an angel in blue silk holding his son. The room was peaceful for the first time in years. Clara looked up and met his gaze. She expected him to be angry that she had entered the room. Instead, Dominic leaned against the doorframe, watching them with an expression she couldn't quite place. It was hunger mixed with pain. "He never sleeps through the night," Dominic whispered, afraid to break the spell. "He just needed to know someone was there," Clara whispered back. Dominic walked into the room. He sat in the armchair in the corner, nursing his drink. "Keep doing what you're doing. I'll stay watch." "You don't trust me." "I don't trust anyone," Dominic replied, his eyes closing briefly. "But he trusts you, and that is enough for tonight." Clara watched him in the dim light. He looked less like a monster and more like a man guarding the only thing he loved. She realized then that Dominic Valenti was dangerous, yes, but he was also fiercely, terrifyingly loyal. And that realization was more dangerous to her heart than any gun. Three days passed in the fortress. To Clara's surprise, the tactical team actually retrieved Muffin. The fat tabby cat was currently living better than most humans, eating fresh salmon prepared by the estate's chef and sleeping on a velvet pillow in Clara's room. Life in the Valenti estate was a bizarre mix of luxury and high-stress prison. Clara wasn't allowed past the garden walls. She had no phone, no internet, and her only company was Constance, who shadowed her everywhere, and Mrs. Higgins, who had the personality of a wet sponge. Dominic was a ghost. He spent his time in the West Wing, where the business was conducted. Men in suits came and went. Sometimes Clara heard shouting. Sometimes she saw men leaving with bandages. The war with the Morettis was escalating. On the fourth afternoon, Clara was in the library reading a story to Constance when the boredom finally snapped. "I need water," she told Constance. "Stay here and color the dragon, okay?" She walked to the kitchen. To get there, she had to pass the corridor leading to Dominic's study. As she approached, she heard voices. Angry voices. "Insanity, Dominic. They are hitting the distribution centers. We are losing millions a day. It was Marco. We hold the line." Dominic's voice was calm, steady. "We do not strike back yet. We wait for them to overextend. Wait, while they butcher our men." "You've gone soft. Ever since that waitress came here, you've been distracted. Careful, Marco. I'm telling you she's bad luck, or worse. How did she find Constance, huh? In a city of 3 million people, she just happens to find the heir to the Valenti throne. You don't think that's convenient?" Clara froze. Her heart pounded. "Silas vetted her," Dominic said. "She's clean. She has debt, a dead-end job, and no connections. Everyone has a price, brother. Maybe the Morettis paid off her debt. Maybe she's the one telling them where our trucks are. Get out. Dom, get out!" The door to the study flew open. Clara didn't have time to hide. Marco stepped out, his face flushed with rage. He saw Clara standing there holding a glass of water. He stopped. A cruel, predatory smile spread across his face. He walked up to her, invading her space until she could smell the stale tobacco on his breath. "Eavesdropping," he whispered. "That's a dangerous habit, sweetheart. People get shot for knowing too much." "I was just getting water," Clara said, holding her ground, though her hands shook. "Enjoy it," Marco sneered. "You won't be here long, one way or another." He pushed past her deliberately, bumping her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. Clara watched him go. A chill went down her spine. It wasn't just his anger. It was the way he looked at her like he knew something she didn't. Later that evening, the storm returned with a vengeance. Thunder shook the foundations of the house. Dinner was a silent affair. Dominic sat at the head of the table, Clara to his right, Constance to his left. Marco was absent. "Where is your brother?" Clara asked, trying to break the tension. "Out," Dominic said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "Handling a problem." "He thinks I'm a spy," Clara blurted out. Dominic paused. He looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "Marco sees shadows everywhere. It keeps him alive. But he knows my orders. You are off limits." "He scares me, Dominic." Dominic set his knife down. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. His skin was warm, rough. "As long as you are in this house, you are untouchable. I give you my word." Boom! The explosion wasn't thunder. It was sharper, louder, and it shook the floorboards. The crystal chandelier above them rattled violently. Before Clara could scream, the alarms started a high-pitched wail that pierced the ears. "Get down!" Dominic roared. He flipped the heavy oak table on its side with inhuman strength, grabbing Constance and shoving him behind it. He pulled Clara down next to him, drawing a handgun from a holster beneath his jacket in one fluid motion. "What is happening?" Clara screamed, clutching Constance, who was crying. "Breach!" Dominic said, his face transforming. The sophisticated businessman was gone. The killer was back. They blew the main gate. "Who?" "Moretti." Gunfire erupted from the front hallway. Automatic weapons. It sounded like a war zone. "Silas!" Dominic yelled into his lapel microphone. "Report. Perimeter breached. They have a truck. They rammed the foyer. Heavy resistance. We have static. Inside." "There's someone inside." Dominic cursed in Italian. He looked at Clara. "Listen to me. Take Constance. Go to the library. There is a panel behind the bookshelf, 3rd row from the bottom. Push the book with the blue spine. It opens a panic room. Go inside and lock it. Do not open it for anyone but me. Not even Marco. Do you understand? I'm not leaving you. Go!" Dominic shoved her toward the servants' entrance. "I will buy you time." Clara grabbed Constance's hand. "Run, baby, run." They sprinted through the kitchen. The staff was gone, hiding or dead. She didn't know. They burst into the hallway leading to the library. Glass shattered everywhere. Bullets chewed up the drywall inches from Clara's head. She ducked, dragging Constance along the floor. She saw men in black tactical gear with red bandanas, the Moretti colors swarming the main staircase. Dominic was there, standing behind a marble pillar, firing with deadly accuracy. He took down 2 men with 2 shots, but they were advancing. Clara reached the library doors. She shoved them open and slammed them shut, locking the heavy deadbolt. The book," she muttered, scanning the shelves frantically. "Blue spine." "There," Constance pointed. Clara rushed to the shelf. She found the blue book, The Count of Monte Cristo. She pushed it. Click. The bookcase groaned and swung inward, revealing a steel door. "Get in, Constance." "Wait," Constance screamed. "Muffin!" The cat was cowering under a desk, hissing. "Constance, get in." Clara shoved the boy into the dark space. She turned back for the cat. As she grabbed the terrified animal, the library door exploded inward. Splinters of wood flew like shrapnel. Clara fell back, clutching the cat. A man stepped through the wreckage of the door. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was wearing a loud suit. It was Marco. He held a silenced pistol. He looked at Clara, and then at the open panic room door, where Constance was visible, trembling in the dark. Marco? Clara gasped. Help us. They're in the house. Marco didn't lower his gun. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I know they're in the house, Clara. I opened the back door for them. Clara's blood turned to ice. You're the traitor. Traitor is such an ugly word, Marco said, walking closer. I'm a visionary. Dominic is running this family into the ground with his codes and his honor. The Morettis offered me the city. All I have to do is hand them the boy. He raised the gun, aiming it directly at Constance. No! Clara screamed. She didn't think. She didn't have a weapon. She had a 10-pound angry cat. Clara hurled Muffin directly at Marco's face. The cat, already terrified, latched onto Marco's face with all 4 sets of claws, screeching like a banshee. Get it off! Marco screamed, firing blindly. The bullet went whooled, shattering a globe. He stumbled back, clawing at the animal. Clara scrambled to her feet. She grabbed the heaviest thing she could reach, a bronze bust of Julius Caesar, and swung it with every ounce of hysterical strength she possessed. Crack! The bronze hit Marco's temple. He dropped like a stone, the gun skittering across the floor. Muffin darted into the panic room. Clara stood over Marco, chest heaving. He was unconscious, bleeding. She grabbed the gun. Her hands were shaking so hard, she almost dropped it. She backed into the panic room, grabbed the handle, and pulled the heavy bookcase shut, just as she heard more footsteps entering the library. She locked the internal bolts. They were sealed in. Clara, Constance whispered in the pitch black. I'm here, Constance, she whispered, pulling him into her lap. She gripped the gun in one hand and held the boy with the other. Outside the steel door, she heard men shouting. Marco is down. Where is the kid? The wall. It's a hidden door. Blow it. Clara squeezed her eyes shut. Dominic, please. Then, muffled through the thick walls, she heard a sound she never thought she'd be happy to hear. The roar of a shotgun, and the voice of the devil himself. No one touches my son. The gunfire outside the panic room intensified a cacophony of violence. It lasted for 5 minutes, then silence. Clara held her breath. A heavy knock on the steel door. 3 slow taps. Clara. Dominic's voice. It was ragged, breathless. Open the door. Clara hesitated. What color is the book? Blue, Dominic replied. Monte Cristo. Open the damn door, Clara. She unlocked it. Dominic stood there. His white shirt was soaked in blood. Some of it, most of it, not. He looked like he had walked through hell. He saw Clara holding the gun. He saw Marco's unconscious body on the floor outside. He saw Constance safe in the corner. Dominic dropped his shotgun. He walked into the small room and fell to his knees, wrapping his arms around Clara's waist, burying his face in her stomach. You saved him, he rasped, his voice breaking. Again. Clara dropped the gun. Her adrenaline crashed, and she began to shake uncontrollably. She put her hands on Dominic's blood-soaked shoulders. It was Marco, she whispered. Dominic. It was Marco. Dominic looked up. His eyes were hard, but filled with a terrible sorrow. I know. Silas found his phone. He stood up, pulling Clara and Constance to their feet. Come. We cannot stay here. The house is compromised. We are leaving. Where are we going? Dominic looked at her, and for the first time, Clara saw something akin to love in his eyes. Not safe, gentle love, but a fierce, burning possession. To the only place they won't look, Dominic said. We are going to war, Clara, and you are going to be my queen." The safe house was not a house. It was the penthouse floor of the Obsidian Tower, a 70-story needle of glass and steel overlooking the Chicago River. It was cold, modern, and completely soulless, a stark contrast to the Gothic history of the estate. But it was secure. The elevator required a retinal scan. The windows were bulletproof, and Silas had stationed a small army in the lobby. It was 2:30 a.m. The adrenaline of the escape had faded, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Constance was finally asleep in the master bedroom, guarded by 2 men. In the living room, the only light came from the city skyline below, casting long, shifting shadows across the floor. Dominic sat on the edge of a leather sofa. His shirt removed a towel pressed to his left shoulder. A bullet had grazed him during the escape, a flesh wound, but it was deep and bleeding sluggishly. Clara walked in, carrying a first aid kit she had found in the bathroom. She had washed the blood off her hands, but she could still smell the copper tang of the library. "Let me do it," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Dominic looked up. His eyes were dark, rimmed with fatigue. "I can handle it. I've had worse." "I know you have, but you're shaking." He didn't argue. He was shaking not from fear, but from the crash of adrenaline and the rage of betrayal. He moved the towel aside. The wound was only a jagged tear through the muscle. Clara knelt between his legs on the floor, opening the kit. She poured antiseptic over the wound. Dominic didn't flinch. He didn't even make a sound. He just watched her face as she worked. "You killed him," Dominic said suddenly. Clara's hands froze. "Marco, is he?" "No. But he will never wake up. The doctors say the blow to the temple caused a massive hemorrhage. He is on a ventilator in the estate's medical wing. He is a vegetable." Clara swallowed hard, fighting back a wave of nausea. I didn't mean to." "He was going to kill my son, Clara." Dominic reached out his hand, cupping her chin, forcing her to look at him. His touch was electric. "You didn't kill a man. You put down a rabid dog. You saved Constance. You saved me." "I was terrified," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm just a waitress, Dominic. I serve coffee. I don't hit people with statues. I don't run from gunfire." "You are not just a waitress anymore." His thumb brushed away a tear falling down her cheek. "You have the heart of a lioness. I saw you tonight. You didn't run. You fought." Clara finished bandaging the wound, taping the gauze down. She stayed there, kneeling before him, her hands resting on his knees. The distance between them felt non-existent. The air in the room was thick, charged with the shared trauma, and the undeniable pull that had been building since that first night in the rain. Dominic leaned forward. His face was inches from hers. She could feel the heat radiating off his bare chest, see the intricate ink of the cross tattoo over his heart, and the jagged scars of old wars on his ribs. "Why did you come back?" Dominic asked, his voice a low rumble. "In the library. You were safe in the panic room. You opened the door for me." "You knocked," Clara said simply. "And I couldn't leave you out there alone." Dominic let out a shuddering breath. "Everyone leaves me, Clara. My wife left when the life got too hard. My brother sold me out for power. In this world, loyalty is a myth." "Not for me," Clara whispered. Dominic groaned a sound of defeated resistance and crashed his lips against hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was the taste of whiskey and blood and survival. Dominic's hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, as if he wanted to merge her very soul with his. Clara rose to her knees, wrapping her arms around his neck, pulling him down. For a man who dealt in death, his touch was overwhelmingly alive. He kissed her like he was drowning, and she was the only air left in the universe. He pulled back, resting his forehead against hers, both of them gasping for breath. "I cannot promise you a happy ending, Clara," he rasped. "I am a bad man. I have done terrible things, and this war, it is not over." "I know," Clara said, tracing the line of his jaw. "But I'm not going anywhere. You said I was in the cage now, remember?" Dominic let out a dark, dry chuckle. "The cage is open. You can leave. I will give you a plane ticket and money, a new identity. You can go to Paris. Tonight." Clara looked at him. She thought about her lonely apartment, the bills, the endless shifts at the diner. Then she looked at the man who had torn the world apart to save his son. The man who looked at her with such raw, unguarded intensity. "I don't speak French," Clara said. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her onto the sofa beside him, wrapping his good arm around her, burying his face in her neck. "Then you stay," he whispered into her skin. "God help you, you stay." They fell asleep like that, tangled together on the leather sofa, while the city lights burned below them. 2 weeks passed, and the glass house penthouse became the nerve center of Dominic's war. He scorched the earth, dismantling the Moretti Empire, piece by piece. Clara became his anchor in the chaos, tending to his wounds and keeping Constance calm. But the silence from Don Salvatore Moretti was deafening. "He's planning something." Dominic paced the living room one evening. "I'm moving Constance tonight to the Berkshires. I have a parley with Salvatore at the steel mill." "It's a trap, Dominic," Clara pleaded, gripping his arm. "I know." He adjusted his cufflinks, looking every bit the lethal kingpin. "But it draws him out. Stay here with Silas until the helicopter arrives. I promise to come back to you." He kissed her a desperate, searing seal of possession and left. 30 minutes later, the penthouse lights flickered and died. Red emergency strobes bathed the room in blood. The elevator doors didn't open. They exploded inward. Gunfire erupted in the foyer, silencing Silas and the guards instantly. "Constance, the closet!" Clara shoved the terrified boy inside. "Don't make a sound no matter what happens." She grabbed a heavy brass lamp and backed into the corner. A man stepped through the smoke. He wore an immaculate white suit that seemed to glow in the red light. It was Don Salvatore Moretti. "Mr. Valenti is currently surrounding an empty building." Salvatore smiled coldly, stepping over Silas's unconscious body. "Why fight the lion when I can steal his cub?" He motioned to his men. "Check the rooms. Find the boy." "No!" Clara screamed, launching herself at Salvatore. He caught her easily, backhanding her across the face. She fell, tasting copper, pinned to the floor by the tip of his cane. "The boy is leverage, my dear," Salvatore sneered. "I take the air, and Dominic surrenders the city." Clara's mind raced. If they took Constance, Dominic would burn the world down, but Constance might die in the crossfire. She had to become the target. "Take me instead," she gasped. "I'm worth more." "You are just a mistress." "I'm pregnant," she lied, the words spilling out in a desperate rush. "I'm carrying his child, another heir." Salvatore paused, his eyes narrowing. "If you take Constance, Dominic will just kill you," Clara hissed. "But if you take the woman he loves and his unborn child, he will kneel. He will give you everything. Salvatore weighed the options. A compelling argument. Kidnapping a girlfriend is just business. He signaled his men. Grab her. Leave the boy. They zip-tied her wrists. As they dragged her to the service elevator, Salvatore called out to the empty room. Tell Dominic if he wants his queen back. Come to the old slaughterhouse. Midnight. Clara looked back at the closet one last time, praying her lie would buy enough time for Dominic to save them all. Dominic stood in the hollow silence of the steel mill, realizing too late that the meeting was a diversion. His phone buzzed. Papa! Constance's terrified whisper froze Dominic's heart. The bad man took Clara. She told him to take her. She said she was pregnant, so he wouldn't take me. Pure glacial rage flooded Dominic's veins. Salvatore hadn't just broken the truce. He had signed his death warrant. Dominic loaded his rifle, his eyes dead and cold. Kill everyone, he ordered his men. Leave Salvatore to me. At the abandoned slaughterhouse, Clara sat bound to a chair, her face bruised. Salvatore checked his watch, smiling cruelly. He isn't coming, my dear. You sacrificed yourself for nothing. Suddenly the power cut. Darkness swallowed the room. Then the main doors exploded inward as an armored truck rammed the entrance. Gunfire erupted a deafening symphony of chaos. Dominic descended from the catwalks like a shadow, his knife flashing in the strobe light muzzle flashes. He slashed Clara's bonds in one fluid motion. Get behind me! Salvatore emerged from the gloom, firing a heavy revolver. A bullet struck Dominic's Kevlar vest, staggering him. But pain was irrelevant now, roaring like a wounded lion. Dominic charged, tackling the old Don into a pile of rusted chains. He slammed Salvatore against a concrete pillar, his hands closing around the man's throat. She carries your heir. Salvatore wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. Killing me won't save the bastard child. Dominic froze his knife, hovering inches from Salvatore's chest. He looked at Clara, confusion warring with adrenaline in his dark eyes. I lied, Clara screamed, stepping over the debris of the battle. I lied to save Constance. There is no baby. Salvatore's eyes widened the realization that a simple waitress had outmaneuvered a crime lord. You lying. She outsmarted you. Dominic whispered, a terrifying smile gracing his blood-spattered face. Goodbye, Salvatore. He drove the knife home, ending the war instantly. Silence fell over the kill floor. Dominic stood up, breathing heavily, and stumbled toward Clara. She ran to him, crashing into his chest. He held her so tight, she could barely breathe, burying his face in her hair. I thought I lost you. He rasped, his voice breaking. When Constance called, I died, Clara. I'm here, she sobbed, kissing his battered hands. I'm right here. You lied. He pulled back, searching her gaze intensely. About the baby. It was the only way to make him leave Constance. Dominic let out a hysterical, relieved laugh. He kissed her fiercely, sealing a promise of forever. You are absolutely insane, he murmured against her lips, and you are the only thing I cannot live without. Let's go home. From a rainy alleyway to the Italian coast, Clara and Dominic proved that love isn't just about soft moments, it's about who you're willing to bleed for. Clara didn't just save a boy that night. She saved the soul of a man who thought he was beyond redemption. What did you think of Clara's bravery? Would you have risked your life to save a child belonging to the Mafia? Let us know in the comments below. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We have a new tale coming next week about a billionaire who falls for his bodyguard. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.